and hide. Okay. So we'll see what issues I run into here. I just upgraded my machine to Mac OS Big Sur, and a bunch of things have seemed to go wonky, but we'll see how Android behaves. So homework for today was to create 2 buttons and 2 text fields, and it turns your first name into your first name and the last name text field into your last name when you hit the button. Does that sound accurate?
Yep.
Okay. So let me run what I got now, which I think should have 1 button hooked up, and then we'll go from there and then keep introducing some stuff. Do not disturb. Let's do that. All right, so now I click it, it works. All right, so I have a working application, so at least my that thing didn't die. All right, so for the homework, we're going to add another text field. We're going to add another button, and you could have done this however you wanted. I'm going to make them a little bit more organized just to kind of throw in some of the stuff we were talking about last time with the linear layouts. So I build most of my interfaces with vertical and horizontal linear layouts. So what I'm going to do is inside of my component tree here, I'm going to click on layout. I'm going to drag a horizontal linear layout in here, and I'm going to put this text view, and I'm going to make another text view. I'll put both of those guys in there, and then I'll actually, you know what? Let me do this. I'll get rid of this one. I'll copy that one. So I just hit on Mac, I hit Command C, then Command V. So PC, it would be Control C, Control V. So now I have 2 identical text views. Now I could have it set to wrap content if I want them to be. I could also make them take up 50% of the screen, that kind of stuff, but we'll just leave it alone for right now. So I'm going to name this first guy. I'm going to call this guy F name. And then I usually put like an underscore TV for text view, just a good naming convention to name this stuff. So I'm renaming this resource ID. So this refactor thing is a software engineering term. It just is going to go through, and any place I use it, it's going to update the name to fname TV instead of my text view. This other one I shouldn't have to say that for because I'm not using it anywhere. So this is lname TV. Oh, because I had copied it, I guess it does need to refactor it. So I'll refactor that. So now I'll just put as a placeholder for my first name, I'll put in first name, and for last name, I'll put in last name. All right, so now one thing I'll actually show you here is, you know, if you want the text to be justified differently, there is a thing for text to, I'm trying to see where it is here. Is it under text appearance, font family? You know, one of these guys. You can mess with boldness and orientation and things like that. But I'm actually going to do it a different way to show you a concept in Android called gravity. So let me open up Keynote here. So gravity. Now, we already know that our applications in Android are made up of activities, and activities are a collection of widgets. Most widgets are something called a view. So a view is anything we can see on the screen. I think that's mostly a true statement. On iOS, it's called a UI view. Anything with the UI in front of it is something you can see. And they're all based off of the parent class UI view, all the buttons and stuff like that. The same thing's true here in Android. So text views are views. Buttons are also examples of views, so on and so forth. So we're going to say here, all views have a gravity attribute, where gravity, let's see, is the current state of gravity within the view. Okay, so what does this ultimately mean? If we treat our views kind of like they're rooms, and then we have a bunch of switches for turning on how the gravity in this room works. So if we have normal gravity, which pushes everything to the bottom, you know, that would be our normal gravity, but we could also have gravity that pushes everything to the top. So everything would go to the ceiling. We have gravity that pushes everything to the left, to the right, to the middle, so on and so forth. So we can set the gravity for any view, and then anything that happens inside that view in the hierarchy would now have the effect of that gravity. Okay, just like if we're at the school, one of the classrooms is inside the building. So we have a parent view, which is the university building, and then we have a room, which is a sub view inside that view. If the university's building had its gravity turned to top, which means we would all float to the ceiling, the room that we're currently in would inherit that gravity unless it did something to make its more local gravity something different. So let me show you this in action. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'm gonna select both of these guys. What's the easiest way to do that? Just like that is the easiest way. So over here in the component tree, you can select a couple of different things at once. And so this allows me to update the same attribute on both of these guys at the same time. All right. And then, so notice it says up here that it's multiple things being selected. So I need to find the gravity setting. It might not be here in the main screen. I might have to click on the show all for text views. Here's all attributes. So we'll scroll down to where it says gravity. And so you can turn on gravity for these different things. Well, I'm going to go ahead and set, if I set the gravity to right, now everything in there got sucked to the right. If I set the gravity to center, now everything is now in the center, so on and so forth. So you can mess around with, what is fill horizontal? This is kind of a new one. You could center vertically, you could fill vertically. What does that do? I'm guessing that's like if it's an image, you'll stretch the image out. But regardless, I'll just put it center. So that'll center these things. And I did notice, does this guy have a specific width associated with it, like a number? Because it's unclear to me why he is shorter than the other one. It's not that big of a deal, but whatever. See, now that guy actually has a real. So if I have this as wrap content, and I have this guy as wrap content, yeah, whatever. Maybe it's just how it's showing it on here. All right. So in any case, I have this guy named as FName TV. This guy's name is LName TV. I'm then going to notice my button is currently gone. Why is my button gone? Because my horizontal linear layout I put in here, its height is to match the parent. And its parent is my vertical linear layout, which takes up this whole screen. So if I instead change his layout height to be wrap content, now it'll just wrap the 2 text fields and give me my box. Similarly, I'm going to go ahead and create another horizontal linear layout. I'm going to put this guy in here, and I'll put the button within him, and then I'll go ahead and give myself another button. So now I have 2 buttons in there, and I'll set both of these buttons width to wrap content. So now I'll see my 2 buttons there. I'm going to have my horizontal linear layout. See, all these things here are they're like warnings. They're talking about using that strings XML file I talked about last time. I never really use that, so that's not something I'm going to test you over or anything. We're just using Android as a little simple thing. So only things that I actually put into the slides do you really need to worry about for details, because this class isn't an Android class. It's a intermediate programming class where we've learned a bunch of Java stuff. Now we're messing with it in the context of something else, so you can kind of get a feel for how this stuff kind of plays out. Now, so I have my 2 buttons. And then what I'll do is I'll set the gravity in my vertical linear layout to be, so notice this is a hierarchy. I'm going to set the gravity of this guy so that everything moves towards the center. Now, if I actually choose center, the global center, it'll move it to the middle. Would have thought that would have moved it to the middle. The other ones are all top. I set it to bottom. Yeah, they're fighting against each other because I didn't set these other ones. That's okay. I'm not going to screw around with that. We're just going to say this looks good enough. I can do something like this. I can say layout width for my buttons. I can say match parent, I believe. And then for both of them, I can do a layout weight. I thought it was 0.5. Yeah. So that makes it half the screen size. Similarly, I can do this layout width, match parent, and then have the weight be 0.5, and it takes up exactly 50% of the width. So things you can screw around with. It's not like an important thing. So I'm going to change the text on this button, and the text on this button is going to be set F name, and the text on this button will be set L name. All right, now these guys are called L name and F name TV. So I need to go back over to my code. And I'm going to change this thing to be called on F name button clicked. And this will set the first name to Mike. And then I'll create a second function on L name button clicked. This will be the L name. Set it to my last name. All right. So I have 2 functions for my buttons. I'm going to show you how this view gets used here in a few minutes because we're not currently using it, but I think it'll make sense when you see it. All right. So I have those 2 functions. Now I need to go set up the on clicks for our buttons to make sure they update the right things. So for my first name, for on click, I want to say on F name button clicked. For the other button, we're going to say on L name button clicked. And then I'll go ahead and run this dude. So now my first name gets set, my last name gets set. All right, so questions about that? All right, so for the time being, I'll go ahead and I will commit that change. And then I will, oh, had I not imported this one anyways? I guess I hadn't imported this one anyways. So I'll go ahead and share this project on GitHub. Oh yeah, I had created it. So I've already, let me just go check that on GitHub. I know some of you were having issues with GitHub anyways. So I don't want to just bypass this. More than likely it's something because I just installed the new operating system, but let's double check that. Okay, so yeah, this is our old version of it. So I should be able to update this now. Yeah, so it should have changes in main activity. Why does it not think there's any changes? Okay, there we go. I just had to say refresh file status. I don't know if that's because of my OS update or not, but once you've imported it, the very first time you put it on there, you go to import into version control, you say share project on GitHub. Once that's happened, now the project's on GitHub. So I can go ahead and hit commit. It shows me my changes. And then I can say commit and push down here. So I'll say commit and push all those changes. Push that. So just like before, you create your initial repository, and then as you have updates, you commit and push those updates to GitHub. So you do the same thing in here. And now I expect that I have my new code. Okay, so let me now show you the use for these views here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple of global fields here. So I'm going to say private text view f name, private text view l name. Actually, I'm going to call it l name underscore TV. Just keep my naming conventions right. And then what I'm going to do is inside of onCreate, I'm going to go ahead and give myself access to both of those. Actually, you know what? It's not going to be text view. It's going to be button. F name button, L name button. So I'm going to go back out to my design. So this is my view. And I'm going to change the name of this button. So right now, my button is just called button 4. I'm going to call this guy fname_button. I'm going to call this guy lname_button. Now, these names here don't have to match my variable names over here in main activity. I just happen to match them because that's a good name for that thing. So I'm going to give myself access to both of those buttons inside of onCreate. So I'm going to say this dot fname button is equal to this dot find view by ID r.id dot fname button. Similarly, this dot lname lname button is equal to this dot find view by ID r.id dot lname button. So what I've done now is I've given myself programmatic access to both of those buttons. Now, we didn't need to do this before, but I'm going to show you what's going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and say public void on button clicked. This guy will take a view v as a parameter. And now what I can do is I can ask if v is equal to this dot fname button, then I'll go ahead and call on, well, actually here, just to really drive the point home, I'll do this stuff. Else if v is equal to this dot lname button, I'll do this stuff. So now I have a single function that handles all of it. Now, this comes down to what is v in this case? V is the view that called this function. So remember that anything we see on the screen inherits from view, which means that buttons are instances of views. So really what I'm asking here is the button that was pushed the same as the fname button? That's what I'm actually asking there. So this on button clicked, they always have to take a view as a parameter. This allows us to find out who called this function by asking about that view. So now I can go in here and I can change both. I think I could change both of them at once. Both of these buttons. And I want to change their on click to be on button clicked. So this guy is now on button clicked. This guy is also on button clicked. So they are both calling the identical function, this function. And this function does one thing if the button that called it is the fname button, and it does something else if the button that called it is the lname button. Okay. So I'll go ahead and run this. And now you see that they do the same thing they did before, but they're now accomplishing it in a little bit different way. Okay, so I'm not necessarily arguing that one is better or worse than the other. Sometimes this approach can be handy, depending on what you're doing. What we're going to start doing today is a rehash of a older project, but writing it in the context of Android, where I think something like this could be handy. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a dice roller. that allows us to kind of dial in the number of dice, and then it does the magic. So it's an app that would actually do something. All right. So now we know, we'll just go ahead into our Java here. We're going to go ahead and create our dice roller class. Or we'll create a, we'll call it dice roller. So I'm going to create a new Java class, not an activity or anything, just plain Jane Java. This is the same stuff we would have been writing inside of Eclipse. So I'll create a Java class. It's going to be a class, and I'm going to call this guy dice roller. Is that what I want to call it? I'm going to call it just dice. You might have another one called dice roller. Let's create a class called dice. And the dice class is going to keep track of a private int number of sides. We'll have our constructor for dice. This guy will take in an int number of sides. And we'll set this dot number of sides equal to number of sides. All right, we'll go ahead and give ourselves a roll method. So that means we're going to need to import. Well, I'll let it import it for me. So we'll say public int roll. This will create a random r is equal to new random. And then I'm going to return r dot next int. And if I say a bound of this dot number of sides plus 1, this will give me a, like if I put in 6, this will give me a number between 0 and 6. Actually, I want to do, I can't use this version of, I can do this, return number of sides plus 1. That'll give me a number between 1 and 6 in this case, if number of sides was 6. All right, so I got my normal plain Jane class called dice roll, or called dice, that will allow me to create a dice and then roll that dice. All right, so let's repurpose our buttons here a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and keep using the set name and set L name. I'll just reuse those buttons. And we'll say, actually, I'll just change the text on this so it tells us something kind of. So we'll say roll D6, and this guy will be a roll D20, something like that. Okay, and we'll change the text on these guys. I'm just going to do a couple of underscores, just a placeholder. Something will go here type thing. All right, and I actually am going to go ahead and rename my buttons. I don't like just reusing variable names, and so we're going to call this guy D6 button. We'll refactor, and this guy will be called D20 button. We'll go ahead and refactor. All right, so now I'll come back into my code, and I'll go ahead and get rid of these two functions since we're not doing anything with them yet. All right, I'm going to rename my variables here. This is going to be D6, and this is going to be D20. Actually, let me show you something here. I can highlight this and then right click on it, and I should be able to do refactor, rename. I'm going to call this guy D20 or D6 rather, button, and you see how it updates it in all the other places I already have it, so I don't have to fix it in multiple spots. Similarly, I'll refactor this guy, and this guy will be called D20 button. All right, so nice convenient thing. That's kind of a software engineering tool where when you want to update your variable names to, you know, be more appropriate when you change your logic a little bit, you can just do it in one place and refactor and we'll update it everywhere else. So now I've named my two text views, except these are I don't know why I set them as text views. Well, here, this was a good mistake. Notice that these guys I've named text views, even though we know they're buttons. And that's okay because when I checked who they were, they came in as a generic view. So I'm just asking if their pointer is the same. So technically, these guys are not buttons. I'm advertising them as being text views, which is not accurate, but it still worked since I was working with them as generic views. So I should call these guys buttons. All right, so I have my two private buttons. We give ourselves access to them here at onCreate. So from this point forward, I have these two private fields that know about those actual buttons. On button clicked, we say if it's a D6 button, what do we want to do? Well, we gave ourselves access to our text view, but we want to go ahead and we want to create a dice object called D6, and this will be a new dice object with 6 sides. And then we're going to set the text to the empty string concatenated with D6.roll. I'll go ahead and roll my dice. Similarly, if I'm in here, I'm going to create a dice D20, and this is going to be equal to a new dice, and it's going to have 20 sides. And then what will I put in here? I'll put in the empty string concatenated with D20 dot roll. All right, so with my simple dice roller right now, I know how to roll D6s and D20s when I hit a button. All right, so if I hit the D6 button, I go ahead and grab the text view that I need. Now, I could make the argument that since I might be doing this multiple times, rather than getting the text view here, maybe I want to get it globally. So I might do something like this. I might say private text view D6 TV, private text view D20 TV. I might make them global variables so I have access to them throughout this activity. And then I could say this dot D6 text view is equal to this dot find view by ID or dot ID dot D6. What did I call it? Did I not rename my text views? Mr. Gonzalez actually does have a real first name, Emily.
What is it?
It's actually part of the backstory. And I'm actually sitting in the exact chair where his name was given.
Wow.
His name is Jesus Gonzalez. And then my wife said, you can't name your elf Jesus. So that's why we call him the more formal Mr. Gonzalez. And then people always say, oh, well, it's just Jesus because that's his last name is Gonzalez. And I said, that's not how he pronounces it. He pronounces it Jesus. And Gonzalez, I mean, he's from Canada, actually. He's not even from Mexico. So it's,
Got you.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. But there is a real first name. It's pretty bad, isn't it? Let's see. Okay. I need to go look at my names for those things. These two text views. I still named it F name. So I'm going to name this guy D6 TV. And I'll name this guy D20 TV. Now, keep in mind, these aren't requirements. I just like to keep my variable names accurate to what they're actually being. So I'm modifying our code here to work for these new settings. So this will be a D6 text view. And this .d20 TV is equal to this find view by ID r.id.d20 TV. Okay, so again, we are seeing MVC in action here. So this is how I programmatically access widgets that are on my view, my interface, model view controller. The controller, this guy, needs to sometimes have access to things that live on our view. And since we're storing those things in two separate places, MVC says model view controller, it's a good idea to keep your model, your view, and your controller in separate places, and then give some way for those things to talk to each other. Since that's the game we're playing, this is how Android allows the controller to access things on the view. I'm giving myself programmatic access to the buttons and the text views. So now in here, we'll call this the D6. Actually, we don't even need this anymore. We'll say this D6 text view set text to D6.roll. Similarly, we'll say this D20 text view set text to D20.roll. So when we click one of those buttons, they both are calling the same function, passing themselves in. The button passes himself in as the one who's calling this function. If it was the D6 button, we'll go ahead and create an instance of D6, roll it, and put it in our text box, text field, text view. It's a text field in iOS. It's a text view in Android. Else if it's the D20 button, we'll create an instance of D20 and roll it and put it in our text view. So now I should be able to run this guy. And when I roll D6, I can get random numbers put in here for a D6 roll. Roll D20, I get my random numbers for a D20. Roll like that. All right, so kind of makes sense how we keep making our application a little bit more complex. All right, so what we're gonna do here, and I think I maybe have told this story before, but I'm gonna D20 gaming dice. Right here. All right. Have I shown you this picture before?
I don't think so.
I guess that's a no. All right. So wouldn't we call that a beautiful user interface? This, what you're looking at, was my very first iPhone app that was out the day that the App Store went live. And the backstory behind this was I had just moved up here. This is in 2006. And so I just moved up to the Milwaukee area from Central Illinois. And I hadn't unpacked my dice yet from like our boxes. And some students wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. So rather than the App Store had already, or iPhone had already announced that they were going to have an App Store the following, like it was like 6 months later. So I was going to have some apps on there. Figured I might as well go and learn iOS development since it's going to be a thing now. So I decided, oh, this will just be my first app. I'll sit down and I'll write a little dice roller app. You know, notice I can click and I can like dial a dice, right? You know, you put in the number, you have your little thing here. So, you know, you type in 9. Or you can type in 12, whatever you want, and then you select the dice you're going to roll, like a D20, and it, you know, puts it there. And then when you actually roll it, it gives you a number and it shows you all the individual rolls up here. I also had a pro version of this called D20 Dice Roller Pro, and it allowed you to build formulas like 9D20 plus 2D6, that kind of stuff. But, you know, in any case, I built this utility as just a, you know, like, oh, I need an excuse to do this and I need some dice. And we played Dungeons and Dragons. It was kind of, you know, funny, quirky thing because I had it running on the first iPhone with the beta software for the App Store. Well, I put this app up on the, now how much would this app make on the App Store today? Apple probably wouldn't even approve it because the user interface is too janky, right? Okay, but dice rollers, dime a dozen. Well, in the first days of the App Store, everybody and their brother bought every single app. So I'm sure grandmothers bought all the dice, they bought dice rollers and stuff like that. So this little project made way more money than it ever should have made, is the kind of the punchline here. But you know, if you kind of fast forward a little bit, this is kind of where coding becomes somewhat of a superpower. When we look at this today, there's nothing impressive about this user interface today, but I was able to slap something together for a little pet project to be first on the App Store when the App Store first went live, and it effectively allowed, you know, me to make a pretty good chunk of change for something it really only took me probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours the very first time I wrote it, figuring out how all the, you know, how all the things connected. But we can imagine right now, we already have the ability to create a user interface that looks like this, don't we? In Android, I mean, this is a vertical linear layout with a horizontal linear layout with the text. Well, actually, this is probably just a text view. This is probably another text view with big font. This is probably a vertical linear layout with a horizontal linear layouts inside of it for the buttons. This is a vertical linear layout with horizontal linear layouts in it for the buttons. And then these are just buttons there at the bottom. So we could really build this user interface with what we know today and build this dice roller. Okay. And yes, you're not going to be able to put this up on the App Store today and have it make any money, but fast forward and pick some other utility, some other widget that, you know, you maybe it is something you would use in your life. You know, students all the time ask me like, oh, do you have any suggestions on projects I can work on and stuff like that? You know, pick a utility, something that would benefit you, and just write some code for it. I mean, you never know when somebody else is going to want to buy it. It's kind of the punchline here. So, you know, as unimpressive as this looks, it looked more impressive than it does today in the very early days of the App Store, but it still didn't look great even then. It looked okay, minus. But having these skills allows you to then use your imagination to create utilities that allow you to solve real problems. So this was my original app on the App Store. It's kind of that was for iOS. I also had it for Android, but kind of a funny history thing. So what we want to do is we want to effectively create this app where we're going to have this whole interface gets put together, and then we're going to actually hook up the logic. So what we're going to do here for the next few minutes, since I've already started this, go back to activity main. We're going to, and I'm going to give you about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 7 minutes to attempt, you're not going to do the pictures yet, but attempt to make your user interface here look roughly like this user interface. If you want to upgrade it to make it look fancier, that's fine, but this is a good user interface to practice off of for practicing with linear layouts, both horizontal and vertical. All right, so take about 5 minutes or so and try to generate this user interface in your Android thing. And then I'll come through and I'll do it the way I think it should be done. And then that'll be our starter code for the homework assignment. Okay, so let's take a look at what we can do here. So let's start off with just kind of building our foundation here. I'm going to start off. I'm just going to dump all of this. Give myself a good starting point. So I have my vertical linear layout. And for those of you, if you create a new project, remember this is a constraint layout initially. You can just right click on it and say convert view and then choose linear layout. That'll convert it to an easier to work with layout, in my opinion. And that has more to do with, I don't have any experience working with constraint views or much interest in creating beautiful user interfaces as exampled here. So I'm going to go ahead and for the very top, I want to create this is going to be a text view. So go ahead and I'll click on common, click on text view, drag this guy out here. I already have it. I'm going to call this guy output underscore TV. And then I'm going to increase his size a little bit. So right now I'll just put some stuff in there, just kind of placeholder type stuff. We'll go ahead and increase his size maybe to 24, something like that. And you can change text color and stuff like that, you know, whatever you want. So what did I have this? Is that like an orange or something? It was a yellow. Okay, so there's my yellow. Now we also had a color for the background here. So I'll choose this guy and we'll select a color. And I think I had it like what it was like a dark gray or something. All right, so I just gave my linear layout a background color. So now everything that's on top of it has that background color. So we'll go with something like that. All right, so now still vertically, I have another text view. This is going to be my total number. And we'll make that guy green. So I'll just drag another text view out here. It's still just vertical. All right. And we'll call this guy the total TV. All right. And I'll put some placeholder text in it. So we'll, put like an 85 in it for right now. And I'm going to go ahead and make this guy way bigger. So 36 is still not going to be big enough. Let's make this guy like 72. Well, look, I don't know. Let's just say that's big enough. All right, we'll make it 72. Now I want him to be centered on there. Maybe even the other thing could have been centered too. So I can select both of these guys and set their gravity to be center. So it'll get sucked to the middle. And then I'm going to change this guy's color. Hold on a second. I'm on the wrong thing for text color. Let me hide this. Where's my other colors? Oh, I just want to select from like the color. There we go. So we'll make this guy. We'll go with that. Say that's good enough. All right, so we have that now. All right, so now we need to have two kind of vertically, well, I'm probably going to put a horizontal linear layout in here because I want one thing next to another thing. So we'll go go ahead and do that. So go to layouts. I'll put a horizontal linear layout in here because I'm gonna have two things next to each other. And what am I gonna have next to each other? I'm gonna have two vertical linear layouts. So I'll put a vertical linear layout in here, and then I'll put another. Now, once you start getting to this point where you have enough things layered, it's sometimes easier to drop stuff down here because I want this other vertical linear layout to be inside this horizontal linear layout. All right. And I'm going to have both of these guys have the width match the parent, but I'm going to do the layout weight to be that 0.5 thing. So they each take up half the screen. That's with the idea that this stuff is on half the screen, this stuff's on half the screen. So I'm going to start filling out this guy here. So this is a vertical linear layout I already have in here, but then I have a horizontal with my 7, 8, 9. So in this first one, I'll put a horizontal linear layout, and I'm going to put 3 buttons in there. Start with 1 button like this. And so we're going to call this guy 7 underscore button. Oh, it has to start with a letter. Seven button. Okay, and we're going to have it wrap its content. So I need to change its text. We're going to say 7. All right, so its width I have set to wrap content. Its height I have set to that, but I'm going to take this 1 off here, which should allow it to squeeze down to its actual size. Actually seems like it's a lot of extra fluff to. That's not really wrapping content. That's doing a much better job of wrapping the content. All right, well, let's just go with that. Let's see, let's get 3 of those next to each other and see if they look good. So that's 1, 2. All right, so 3 of them next to each other. We'll call those all pretty. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all those, and we're going to say wrap content. And then we're going to say each one has a layout weight of 0.33. So I'll have it take up a third of that. And then we can make your, well, we can leave the button colors that if we want. All right, so now I have a horizontal linear layout here with these 3 buttons in it. Oops, sorry. So now I need to have another horizontal, and another horizontal. So I need to have 3 more horizontal linear layouts, really 2 more with the 3 buttons in it. So let's just do that first. So I do that down here at this level. So I just, close this thing. I'm going to copy this horizontal linear layout, and then I'll paste it. Did it not go into the right place? It didn't. Paste it there. Paste it there. Okay, so now I have those guys. I'm going to have the height for all these wrap content like that. And we'll get them sucked closer together here in a second. These guys all have bad names right now. That's what it's screaming about, duplicate IDs. So here we can go fix that. So it's going to be 7. This will be 8. No, actually, we probably don't even need them to have, well, yeah, we do if we're going to be a single function. So that's going to be our 8. This will be our 9. Then we'll have 4, 5, 6. And then we'll have 1, 2, 3.
When you change it on one of the linear layouts, it's changing it on all 3 of them.
What is?
So like all 3 of them now have 1 button.
Yeah, I see that. 2 button. Wonder why that is. Maybe copying and pasting it wasn't the best idea. These guys should not be linked. Well, let's change this one back. We'll say 7, 8, and 9. And we'll delete the other ones and we'll just rebuild them. Okay. And let's actually change the text on them just so we can visualize it better. Okay. And then why is this guy not happy? So why don't we just get rid of that? And we'll get rid of that. So we'll just have one of those. And then I'll go ahead and put some more horizontal linear layouts in here. And I'll put this guy at the top. And here is our, all right, we need each of these guys to have their height set to wrap content. Okay. And then we're probably going to go ahead and have, well, I guess we could mess with that when we get to it. Let's have this guy also wrap content. All right, so here's our first row of buttons. I'm just going to try to copy one button. And then let's change his name to 4 underscore button. Okay, it only changed it in just there, so that's good. And then this will be 5, and this will be 6. Okay, and then in this one, oh, I need to copy a button. 2, 3. So this will be 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let's update the text. So this is 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, like that. And then what's the rest of my interface? So let me go ahead and start filling in the dice on the other side instead of this last part here, just so you can get this other half of it in here. So I'm going to put another horizontal linear layout, but this guy's going to go inside of this vertical layout, linear layout over here. So I'm going to compress this guys down. So here's one vertical linear layout. That's that guy. That's that guy. And then here's this linear layout that's in there. I'm going to set him to wrap content, but his width will be match parent. And we'll go ahead and throw a couple of buttons in there. And we'll have this guy be a D6 button maybe. And we'll put 3 more buttons, or 2 more buttons rather. Okay. And this will be, how did I even organize my buttons here? Oh, I did D4, D6. So I only actually have 2 buttons in here. So this will be the D4. Change its text to be D4. Then we have the D6. And I want to keep that naming convention. And that says D6. So that's my linear layout there. And I'm going to need how many of those? 3 of them. So we'll go to layouts. So 2 more horizontal linear layouts. And then I'm actually going to make these buttons bigger just because they will fit. So I made that guy, here, we'll just make it 100. Okay. then the height for this guy is going to be wrap content, so on and so forth. Okay, so you kind of see where we're going with this. So your homework for Tuesday, you see what this guy currently looks like. In fact, I'm going to copy image. Homework. Paste this picture in there. Create a dice roller that works similarly to what the roller on the right, to how the roller seems to work. Obviously, you might need to make a couple of assumptions, but basically the top line shows all of the individual rolls. In the example, 9d20 rolls a d20 9 times. So I get the 9 individual rolls, and I get the total of all the rolls. The interface only lets you select a number of dice and a single kind of dice. So you could roll 200 d12s, but then you would have to change it to, if you wanted to roll, you could change 12 to a d20. So if I hit d20 here, it shows d20. If I hit d12, this d20 changes to d12, to d10, to d8, to d6, to d4. So I have to pick a single kind of dice, and then I can put in with my calculator thing here the number of rolls I want to have. At the bottom, the roll button rolls the selected number of dice. The percentile button rolls a random number between 1 and 100. Okay, so homework for Tuesday is to make your Android application roughly work like this. If you want to go crazy with the interface, make it look better, that's fine. You don't have to do pictures. They're called drawables. That's not a big deal. Just put text on it for now. I'll show you a picture next time or something. All right, questions, comments, concerns, bribes. And I'll push the current version of my code up so you can look at my layout stuff, but hopefully you are going to write some Java logic in here, and you've kind of gathered that we just build everything out of these horizontal and vertical linear layouts to get you something reasonable. All right, I will see everybody on Tuesday.